Okay, so this is an SMC Quadzilla Ram 250, and the rear bearings on the rear axle needed replacing. I couldn't find any information on the internet as to how to do it, so here's a quick video on how to disassemble the rear axle. Now, I've already replaced the bearings and this is sort of loosely assembled, so it's not how I started, but I thought this video might be useful. So everything's pretty clean and should come undone more easily than it did the first time round. Okay, so before we start, or before you start, I would recommend keeping everything as it is, not taking anything apart, keeping the chain on, putting the bike in gear with the wheels on the ground, and the reason is this lock nut here. So this lock nut is on the threads here, however the hub is actually splined onto the rear axle and is held on by this lock nut. So what you need to do is to hold this hub, which is fixed to the rear axle still, and then turn this nut. Okay, so if the chain is if it's engaged in gear and the chain is on and the wheels are on the ground, that's going to give you more friction to work against to undo this nut. Now, it's a standard thread, so if you're looking from this side here, looking that way, you look at it and it goes anti-clockwise to undo. So this is, you do anti-clockwise. Now, if you try to undo it and it's still turning the engine and spinning the wheels, what you can actually do is put something like a screwdriver through the sprocket and the disc here, turn it slowly until it engages on something against the rear axle assembly holder, and then you can use that as extra resistance. But please be aware that if you do that, make sure that something's not going to break, because you're going to be putting a lot of torque through this nut to undo it. Now, I didn't have the proper tools. You can buy the tools, they're around $50 I think, just look online. I actually use these trusty old Stilsons that I've had for years, but be aware that you can damage the nut. Okay, however, it did come across, once I worked out what I needed to do, it did actually come undone fairly easily. Right, so let's imagine that you've loosened that nut. That's all you need to do. Then we can go into the actual process of disassembling the rear axle. So what I would then recommend is putting it on something solid like this, on the bash guard, and lifting it up. Then you're ready to take the wheels off. Okay, so there's just 4 nuts to undo the wheels. They came undone fairly easily. Then there's a split pin down through here. Okay, then you can just undo this nut, and again, this, because it was a split pin through it, it wasn't torqued up very high because it locks automatically with the split pin. So that comes off, and then you can take, there's a washer, and then that comes off, and again that's splined. Okay, make sure you put all the bits together safely. Come around here, you take the 2 bolts holding the brake off, and you can just rest it there. Okay, then whilst it's in this with the chain still engaged, what I recommend is doing all of the nuts here. Now please be aware that when you undo these nuts, that they've got these little tab washers here that connect 2 of the stubs, and you need to they're locking tab washers. So you need to make sure that you hammer down the tabs before trying to undo the nuts. Obviously, with being a quad, it's likely to be encrusted in mud and all sorts of debris, so give it a good clean beforehand. Okay, so then do all 6 of those, which you need to do to take it off anyway. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. Once they're undone, then you can take the chain off. Okay, I'll undo this one here. And there's the tab washer that I was talking about. Okay, now you'll be able to get the sprocket off. Make sure I put that in that safe. Okay, this is undone. Comes off all the way. Now mine actually had a another lock nut on here. I'm not sure whether it was spare or whether it was there to protect the threads, because it wasn't actually engaged as an additional locking nut. It was just on there. So I'm going to refit it when I put it back. Okay. So we have a quick overview. So we can now actually take this hub off. So that's splined. So that slides off. And now it should be just a case of going to the end of the axle here, and that should pull out now. Okay, I'm being careful that I don't damage the lips on the seals like that. And you may notice, just back it a bit here, that you also have the disc hub, brake disc hub there, and that slides on. But to be able to get it out, you need to slide the shaft through, and that is it. Obviously, when they haven't been taken apart for a few years and it's covered in mud, things are going to be not quite as smooth as that. It took me about 2 hours to do it the first time around. Also, I didn't quite know what I was meant to be doing because I couldn't find any instructions. And the assembly is just the reverse. I'll include some links to the size of bearings and the and the seals that you need at the bottom of the video, and hopefully now that will save a lot of you some heartache in removing the rear axle from your SMC Quadzilla Ram 250. Thanks.